afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm Tony Bell, president and founder of Phoenix Consulting Company and proud member of the CMC's Board of Trustees and lifetime member. So thank you to today's forum sponsors, Improving Corner-Kokosing and Columbus State Community College, where I am a proud alumnus. Today's live stream is presented by the Center for Human... Yes, you can clap for that. I mean, I was with Columbus State way back when it said, Columbus State, we have your future in mind. And I was like, for real? They need to bring that one back, but anyway. Today's live stream is presented by the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation and by the Columbus Dispatch. Let's thank all of those supporting today's forum. I'd like you to please welcome David Cofer from today's sponsor, Columbus State Community College, to introduce today's speaker. David, welcome.
Thanks, Tony. And we may have you come on campus and sing that because that was fantastic. I mean, that was fantastic. Good afternoon, everyone. As Tony mentioned, my name is Dave Cofer, and I have the privilege of serving as Director of Partnerships and Programs at Columbus State Community College. At Columbus State, our mission is to educate and inspire, providing our students with the opportunity to achieve their goals. And for our students, that goal achievement is often synonymous with obtaining a better quality of life for them as individuals, as well as their families. And that better quality of life is even more often aligned with obtaining better employment, or more specifically, gaining entry to a career path that leads to a prosperous future, a future that includes earning a family-sustaining wage and opportunities for advancement over the course of their careers. Needless to say, the State of the Workforce Report is central to our mission. Through the leadership of our Workforce Advisory Council, we have our finger on the pulse of the region's workforce needs and expectations. Comprised of senior human resource and talent acquisition professionals from some of the area's largest employers, the Workforce Advisory Council serves as a conduit for the flow of information through which the college is able to remain both nimble and agile, ensuring that we can move at the speed of business. Thank you, Rocky Parker, for that one. I know Rocky's in the audience today. Access to information such as that which will flow from today's discussion is central to our collective ability to ensure that we model the very best of what has become known as the Columbus Way, and that we do so in a way that provides all of the region's residents, a clear and accessible pathway to achieving both their personal and professional aspirations. It's now my pleasure to introduce today's panelists. To my immediate left, please welcome Ryan Burgess, President and CEO of Goodwill Columbus. To Ryan's immediate left, Nichole Kneedler, Chief Talent Officer with Huntington National Bank. And to my far left, Dr. Tian, Research Scientist with the John Glenn College of Public Affairs and the Center for Human Resource Research at The Ohio State University. And our host, Colleen Marshall, co-anchor with NBC4. Let's clap for Colleen. You can learn more about today's speakers in your forum flyers, and to set the stage for our conversation, please welcome Chance Shannan with the Workforce Development Board of Central Ohio. Chance, welcome.
Thank you. I was told to keep this short. So I'm trained through my master's program to write 50-page essays, so I'm going to try to not bore you this morning. So thank you, everyone. Welcome. Appreciate you all coming. So the Workforce Development Board of Central Ohio, our focus is on being the backbone organization that supports the workforce system. We have a lot of common interests with the Columbus State Community College, and our goals are really to develop the workforce as well as creating talent pipelines that meet business needs. And we kind of try to bring people together to solve those challenges. But I kind of want to start with a little informal survey, kind of settle a debate we've been having. How many of your organizations are hybrid or remote? By show of hands. Okay. How many of your organizations are 100% in the office or on-site? Okay, majority is still hybrid and remote. Have any of your organizations started a diversity, equity, inclusion, or access initiative in the past 3 years? Okay. Is anybody currently hiring? Okay, so I have some bad news for you. So the labor participation rate continues to be the lowest it has been in the past 40 years. There's some news out there about a possible recession and how some of these numbers might change, but currently that's our situation. It is the lowest it has been in 40 years. Since 1950, 2 out of 10 men have dropped out of the workforce. So if you're doing the math, since 1950, if you have 100 men, 20 of them have stopped working who would have been working in 1950. And that trend has continued for decades and it doesn't look like it's coming to an end yet. The women or female participation rate in the workforce, we actually saw that, in the United States, it's grown tremendously over the years, but it plateaued in the early 2000s. And then we kind of saw the women participation rate drop off a little bit. It was obviously hindered again by the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, and then again by the pandemic. And so the trend that we're seeing with labor participation for women is that it might take decades for that labor participation rate to rebound without intervention. It kind of creates another paradoxical problem because the rate at which women increase their participation, the U.S. is also seeing birth rates decline, which again is another barrier for expanding our long-term projections for workforce. Immigration to the United States has been a primary way that we kind of backfill our labor shortage needs. And basically there's a trend since 2010 to 2019 that shows the U.S. is short at least 2 million immigrants, basically throughout the pandemic period. And if you think about that, 500,000, 750,000 people per year who would have otherwise come to the United States and fill a lot of the positions that you're hiring for today. And at the same time, there continues to be 2 jobs for every 1 person that is unemployed. So that's the bad news. The good news is that there are 2 jobs for every 1 person that's unemployed. The opportunities abound. And all you have to do is kind of look up the street and see who's building new structures to find out what our data is showing is that healthcare is one of the fastest growing industries in our area. Between 2018 to 2028, it was projected to grow by 25%. And again, this parallels what we're seeing demographically with an aging population, boomers retiring, and that healthcare is just a growing industry as a whole. IT continues to grow. In the region as a whole, we know this, that our population is increasing. Almost every occupation is growing with that population growth. Areas that continue to stand out in the top growth rate in this, IT, computer, mathematics, engineering type fields continue to accelerate. Construction is growing between 9 and 10%, still one of the highest in the area, and I don't think our numbers fully reflect what Intel is doing. So you'll have to come back next year come back for our next year's report when we have more details on that. So we basically, as a region, we have a lot of work to do. If you're an employer here today, I would encourage you to consider what does it mean to be an employer of choice? That's creating your internal development strategy, your retention. How do you keep your employees engaged and show them opportunities to grow within your organization? The bare minimum today is competition for wages and benefits. That's kind of your foundation, and everybody has to obviously focus on that, but also getting creative with the sort of benefits that people are looking for. Many of you raise your hands that you've continued to be hybrid or remote. Again, you will see that's no longer a competitive benefit. You continue to need to grow in those areas. One of the key focus areas for us, again, and one of the most fundamental challenges that we're seeing, particularly with youth, is career exploration. Many of you raise your hands, and the sad fact is there are thousands of youth in Central Ohio who have no idea about any of the opportunities you're hiring for today. So I think we need to get more creative about how we engage the K-12 space. And I would just make a plug. So there's April 27th next year is the Take Your Sons and Daughters to Work Day. I think we can take that one step further and say take every kid to work. So if you don't have kids, take your neighbor's kids, find someone else, give them an opportunity to come see what's happening in your offices. And I think, that's a small commitment to leverage one day a year to invite youth from the community to come see what's going on in your organizations. You know, we all raised our hands too that there's diversity, equity, inclusion, access initiatives that we're doing. And I think most of us have taken great first steps. You know, we've done implicit bias training, emotional intelligence, and cultural awareness. The companies that are really winning in this space have gone a step further. And I can tell you a little bit about a partnership we have with the Columbus Chamber. It's training for leaders in that space to put together action plans and measurable results. That it's taking that next step. You've educated your staff. How do you implement it? How do you measure it? And there's some really good tools there. I encourage you to contact Charisse over at the Columbus Chamber if you're interested in that. So last but not least, I'll just plug that we also encourage you to contact us at the Workforce Development Board if you're looking for opportunities to engage with the nonprofit system and look for talent that way as well. And we also have a conference coming up in March, Workforce Evolution, where we're bringing together HR professionals as well as our nonprofit workforce professionals to kind of build that intersection to bring people who currently have barriers into the workforce. So, and I'll kind of end with this, a quote from Abraham Lincoln where he says, "The best way to predict the future is to create it." Colleen, we look forward to today's conversation.
All right, thank you so much. And I look out here and I see a lot of employers and a lot of people who are trying to hire, and we hear that low workforce participation rate that I think of as voluntary unemployment. And you wonder, why? How do people survive when they've chosen to step away from the workforce, from the workplace? And Dr. Liu, I'm going to start with you on that one. You look at the trends and the data. What is it that is keeping people who otherwise should be in the workforce from entering the workforce?
Well, thank you for the question. So, of course, there will be lots of reasons. So this pandemic is definitely a really special event. It is different from any of the recessions we have seen before. You see a huge drop, you see a huge increase in unemployment in just within 2 months. And then you see people gradually getting back to work. So, we speculate there could be a lot of reasons. First, the increase in government compensations, and another thing is the closure of schools and daycares, and this, of course, increased the parents' childcare burden. And also because of the pandemic, people reduce their consumptions and also travel less. And I believe maybe many of you haven't had a vacation in the past 2 years. So yes, so people's savings have increased. So a lot of people, they may choose to just rely on their savings or family contributions or just the government compensations. And this is a small part. But I think one interesting I want to share is that the pandemic, of course, makes the decline of the labor force participation rate worse. But there are a lot of really underlying issues that we have been seeing for decades. One thing is, of course, the aging of the population. So a group of researchers, they have done analysis to analyze what if the pandemic didn't happen, and how would the labor force participation rate change? And the answer is it will still have a really small decline. Maybe not as worse as when the pandemic happened, but yes, the labor force participation rate will continue to decrease. And again, there are a lot of reasons. The two things I would like to mention here is that first, the aging of the population. So the percentage of senior workers, meaning people who are 65 years older and older, in the overall population are increasing. And those researchers, when they break down the population by different age groups, actually within each age groups, labor force participation rate are increasing. So this means that no matter the younger workers or senior workers, everybody actually work harder. The problem is the labor force participation rate for senior workers are on average much lower than the average labor force participation rate. It's usually for people between age 65 and 75, their participation rate is just below 30%. And for people who are older than 75 years old, their labor force participation rate is below 10, right? Our current labor force participation rate is around 62. So when we have a larger group of the aging population, on average, they drag down the labor force participation rate. And another important thing, I believe, really important for the overall labor force participation rate are the education and training, the skill mismatch in the current job market. So overall, for less educated workers, their labor force participation rate, at least in Columbus metropolitan area, is just above 50%. But if they have a high school degree, their labor force participation rate are going to increase to 70%. And for those who have bachelor's degrees, their participation rate is just below 90%. So there is a huge difference between well-educated and less educated workforce. So the problem with less educated workforce is that they could easily become discouraged when the recession happened, because they are always the ones who got fired the first, and they probably have to work overtime. So all these various reasons, they lead them to drop out of the labor force.
Well, I'm going to ask you, Nichole, because you are working directly with people who are, you are screening them and you are talking to them. So what are you hearing? What are the, not maybe the barriers to reentering the workforce, but also the barriers for you finding people who are qualified, willing, and able to work?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the main focus at Huntington is that we really have focused in on the workers that we have, the colleagues that we have, and focusing there first. Because we always know, if we look externally, those wage wars that happen, those wage wars don't necessarily have a winner in the end. We can pull people back and forth across High and Broad Street to all of the other financial institutions, and no one wins in that scenario. So we have spent more time and energy at Huntington in ensuring that colleagues at all different levels have access to programs that can help build their skills. So we're building our internal bench so that we don't have to rely on external factors to be able to work through our workforce needs. Now, that's not to say that at the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't see some attrition in our entry-level positions. Of course, we saw that just like everyone else saw it, but we're finding that that's really leveling out for us. And what we're focusing in on, again, are those programs and those partnerships with Columbus State and Franklin University and other areas here in Columbus to build internally our workforce. Huntington's has always been a company built on community and relationships, and we take that seriously, whether it is the communities that we serve, whether it's our customers, but also with our colleagues. And so we make sure that they feel as though they have plenty of growth and plenty of development right there at Huntington, so that we don't have to necessarily spend a lot of time looking elsewhere.
Ryan, we often think of Goodwill as being, oh, that's where they train disabled people, but you do so much more. So what kinds of demands are you seeing on your job training program from employers that you're finding maybe startling at the need out there for workers who are trained and trained well?
Yeah. Thanks, Colleen, and thanks for inviting me today. And you probably are wondering, why is somebody from Goodwill here today? Because people think of our stores and our donation centers, which is great, but we do far more than that. Across the country, Goodwill, we're one of the largest workforce providers in the country. 1 million people come through our doors. 80% of those individuals have a high school degree or less. About 60% of those individuals represent some racial or ethnic minority, tens of thousands of veterans, tens of thousands of people that have been impacted by the justice system. And as you mentioned, certainly the legacy we have here in Columbus is serving individuals with disabilities. So that's why Goodwill is on the stage today. And there's another Goodwill person in the back, my predecessor, Margie Pizzuti, as well. It's great to see Margie. But we're trying to help individuals find their first job or their next best job. We're kind of focused on that entry-level space, just trying to get people back into the game. So as a partner of the Ohio Means Job Center and the Workforce Board, we are one of the nonprofits in the community that provide kind of that basic career counseling, job training, helping folks get back into the labor force. And we do that a bunch of different ways through those counseling programs that we have. But we also offer an array of kind of basic digital skills training, IT credentialing. We focus on those in-demand jobs in Central Ohio, industry sector focus, healthcare. We provide the STNA credential that's much in demand within the healthcare industry. So we're really trying to engage all of those folks that we talk about that have fallen out of the labor force pool. And if you look at this handout, and we were talking about this earlier, the workforce report, there's 562,000 people in the Columbus MSA that are not in the labor force. Now, part of that is, the retired boomers, but that is a lot of people that have lost hope. And there's a whole bunch of different reasons for that. And Goodwill, we're here to try to bring those people back into the labor force.
But when we see how many jobs are available and how many people are hiring and desperately looking for well-trained workers, there's like a disconnect. When my kids were in high school, and they're in their 30s now, but everyone was told, you go to college. If you can, you go to grad school. And my son had the very, very practical major in college of philosophy that really takes you places. He's an attorney now, so I shouldn't make fun of him. But when he chose that major, we were like, what? But now we're seeing that pressure to go to college, to get the degree, and then to burden yourself with grad school loans is shifting. So what does the state need to do to have a more practical application of workforce development? Where are we failing employers on the state level that maybe, and Dr. Liu, I'll ask you this, what should the state, what should educators be doing that they have failed to do so far?
Well, again, yes, the college, currently, college is still a really effective way in terms of increasing your earnings. But the problem is here, the data we're seeing, there's something what we call selection bias. So this means that people with the highest level of abilities, they go to college. And even perhaps in the counterfactual, in the other reality, if they didn't go to college, they may still move on to the top of the labor market. So the problem is, what do we do for people who didn't go to college? I think an important thing is that there are many alternatives for college, right? We have apprenticeship programs, and we also have the Ohio Technical Center programs, which it only requires you to go to take some classes in community colleges, and also give you a lot of the work experience, right? So I do think, like for educators, they should give students this information. Perhaps since when they are in high school, they should try to tell them there are many paths for you to be successful in the labor market, right? College is not the only way, because when we are talking about I, as economists, we often think about decision-making, right? Should you go to college? And the cost we're thinking about going to college is usually the tuition. Some people get a huge debt after they get out of college, but the other cost is what we call opportunity cost, is what you have given up when you go to college, right? For a lot of people, perhaps they can get higher returns if they are gaining work experience. It's still another form of human capital, right? So they should really think about, are they going to get more higher return in the labor market, or are they perhaps could have better academic performance in college? And I think another thing is in terms of the curriculum design. In college, usually, how many of you have taken the calculus in college? how many of you are still using it in your day-to-day work? Right. So the problem about the college curriculum is that it's really built, sometimes it's really like an IQ test, right? It really built a lot of, it's really leads you to like a more academia pathways. So for me, it's useful for me, but maybe for a lot of you, maybe you never really go back to read your college textbooks, right? So we should really think about the alternative ways for education. So I've been done studies with apprenticeship programs. So basically, you still need to get some level of theoretical background. You need to understand, if you want to be an electrician, you need to understand some simple math and simple physics. But hopefully you don't really need to go to like college class and be bored with all these theories and equations. Instead, when we design those classes for these programs, we should really think about how we can connect it really with the knowledge you need to use at work. And you also need to inform students about those different pathways. So when I was doing this research, I talked with a former electrician. So he said that basically the reason he became an electrician is because he knows somebody who is electrician in his family. So a lot of people, a lot of his friends or his classmates were not even aware of that, right? And not a lot of high school students, after they graduate from high school, not a lot of students really go to Ohio Technical Center or thinking about those pathways, right? So we should really inform students about those different pathways and also really rethink about how we design the curriculum to fit those people who probably are going to have high returns in the labor market.
You know, we're seeing a resurgence of unions that we had not seen in, I can't remember, at least a decade, where people are forming new unions and are kind of flexing their union muscles. We had a teacher strike here. Kroger is threatening a strike here in Central Ohio, the workers, because workers have power right now. Are you seeing that? Are you seeing a difference in attitude that you mentioned that you are centered on your employees? Well, employees have new expectations, don't they, on the benefits and the workplace environment that they should have.
They do, Colleen, and I think one of the most important things that we've done that I think has attributed to the slow of some of our initial attrition is the fact that we do a lot of listening to our colleagues. We have regular surveys. I'm sure many of you have those in your organizations as well. But when we look at our surveys, we stay really close to the engagement index and understanding who is engaged, how are they engaged? Are they engaged in some of our BRGs and our ERGs and some of those things that make Huntington feel like the family and the community that we want to create? Consistently on our voice survey results, we have over 90th percentile of engagement. And we hold that standard regardless of whether we're in a pandemic or whether there's the Great Resignation or whatever else is going on outside of our doors. And to that end, we have also invested, like many other companies have, in full ranges of benefits that we would never have done in the past or that we wouldn't have considered in the past. So some of those great ideas of those benefits come directly from our colleagues, and we continue to fuel that so that the colleagues feel as though they're being heard and that they understand that we're an organization that will flex depending upon their needs. But it is very important that that they're heard and that they have a voice at the table in terms of what we look like.
I see you nodding at that.
Colleen, I'd actually like to go back to your comments or questions about the education system. I put as much of this on the business community as I do on educators. They have a lot to do every day, but too often business leaders are not engaging the education system. They're not going into the schools and saying, hey, this is what we need. How can we partner? How can we work together?
Like a direct contact to educators.
Absolutely. And it sounds so commonsensical, but it doesn't happen nearly enough. So I do think those conversations are starting. I do think there's a recognition now that not every child or student needs to go or pursue a four-year degree. That's finally starting to happen, which I think is great. One of the things we've done at Goodwill, and this is actually a fun exercise for all of you to sit down with your HR teams and hiring managers, is we have about 150 job descriptions at Goodwill. We've stripped out all degree requirements.
Really?
Yeah. Now we have some positions by contract that we have to have those requirements in there. But when you think about it, the overwhelming majority of Americans, they're not going to college. So if you want an inclusive environment, you're immediately taking out 2/3 of the people if you're requiring some type of college
But are you
degree.
saying to college students, well, maybe your degree isn't worth that much?
Well, I think that those are the hard questions that parents are now asking and students
Yeah.
are now asking. They're starting to question what is the value proposition. So I think it's starting to change, but we just have a lot of work to do.
Well, this is going to make some of you in this room say, okay, boomer, but here's my next question. I've heard from some employers, including some that I have worked for, that there is a generational difference in the attitude that younger people bring into the workplace now. There is a more expectation. You know, when I went to work, and I'm 66, but my dad said, you go to work, you show up, you keep your mouth shut, and you work. You're always the hardest working person in the room. And I've told my kids that. You may not be the smartest or the prettiest, but you can always be the hardest working. That's not necessarily an attitude that employers are seeing. People are saying, I want my free time. I want family time. I don't want to work a 60-hour week when I start. And in my business, we work 60-hour weeks. So are you seeing an attitude difference generationally, and do they maybe have the right idea?
We did a lot of work around personas at Huntington, and just to understand that very question. Is there a difference generationally? Is there a difference between remote workers who are engaged versus hybrid workers who are engaged versus in-office workers? Because we have all three. And we took a look at all of those personas, and what was interesting for me is I expected that exact thing, Colleen. I expected that younger workers wanted to have their freedom, they wanted to be outside of the workplace, and that the older workers would want to be in the workplace. And what we really found as we cut across all of those personas, and these were personas built by our own Huntington colleague feedback with our marketing group, and what we found was that it really was more it was more of an indicator of people's preferences and the ways they like to work than it was generational. We have a lot of our interns that are in our intern programs that are saying, please bring us back into the office. They want to be in the office. They want to be in the spaces. But as we started cutting across that, it was very interesting. We didn't see the generational cut acrosses that I thought we would see in those in that data.
You said you surveyed your workers to find out what are your needs, what are we doing right, what are we doing wrong. What surprised you about those responses? I mean, what are workers looking for?
I think what surprised me the most is that, at least for us, a lot of it was simple things like I need to make sure that I've got particular benefits, and benefits that, again, that we wouldn't have normally thought of. Pet insurance, it's a big deal to some people, and making sure that especially younger generations, that their values are reflected in the company's values. That becomes more and more important, whereas compensation becomes less important, and being values aligned becomes more important. So those were some of the things that surprised me, because when I was younger, I would say that compensation was up there as a pretty important thing for me, and everything else probably fell in behind, and we're seeing that shift.
Well, we also saw all these people with their hands up about the diversity programs, but isn't it, I'll ask this of all three of you, isn't it also important when you are recruiting and paying attention to diversity by gender, by so many issues, by race, by gender, by sexuality, by personal identification, that, okay, so now we have this myriad of people with all different backgrounds, but don't you have to work to make sure everybody blends and to celebrate that diversity? Don't just hire gay people, have a team that walks in the gay pride parade. Don't you have to take the workforce you've got and then somehow make them merge?
So true. You have to walk the walk. You can't just talk the talk. And so the other thing is that if you expect to have diversity numbers in your organization, you have to make sure that that diverse person you've hired, good for you, you hired a diverse person. They need to be able to look left, right, up and down and see people just like them around them. And if they don't, they're not staying. They're staying in a place where they see people like themselves succeed, whether that is gender diversity or ethnic diversity or even geographic diversity or sexual preference. All of those things matter, and they want to see people who look and act like them being successful in major organizations.
Yeah.
Sorry,
go
Colleen,
ahead.
and here's a plug for all the nonprofits in the room, is we offer a mission and purpose. And I think a lot of young people are looking for that. I'm a recovering banker, so I know bankers have mission and purpose too. But I think the nonprofit space is very attractive to young people because of that mission and purpose that we all offer.
But we're talking about what employers need to do.
Yeah.
What about the expectations for the employees? You're involved with a lot of job training programs. What are you saying to them about what they should bring to the table, about their need to be loyal, to be timely, to be efficient, to be, to appreciate the workplace?
Yeah.
How do you train that into someone?
Yeah, and that's something we spend a lot of time on because it does take, I think, a certain type of culture where our managers, our supervisors have that level of empathy, that understanding of the individuals that we are employing. We can't have strict 3 strikes and you're out. If you're late 3 times, you're out. We have to work with people because we understand all the different barriers that they're facing in their lives. So it takes time with managers in creating that culture. We have what we call our I-CARE values: integrity, collaboration, accountability, respect, and excellence. And we're constantly talking about that with our leadership team to make sure that flows down through the entire organization so people understand the expectations of working at Goodwill.
Well, the Columbus Metropolitan Club likes to engage conversation, so we're going to ask you if you have a question for our experts up here to line up over there by the microphone. We ask that you have a question and don't give a speech. I'm always reminded to give that. So please introduce yourself and tell us your question.
Oh, as everyone knows, I'm Mantra Moody. I'm curating questions online, and thank you everyone for being here. Appreciate it. All right, so our first question is from Julie Moorer. What free evidence-based tools and resources are available to inform workforce-related decisions?
Yeah, I can answer that question. I'm also working at Ohio Education Research Center. Since the start of the pandemic, we have built a tool called Ohio Unemployment Insurance Claims Dashboard. The UI claims, it tracks the number of insured unemployed in Ohio. So basically, it is somewhat different from the unemployment. However, the data is more timely. It is released on a weekly basis. However, the Bureau of Labor Statistics data, there is usually a lag. So currently, you can only know the unemployment in August. But with the dashboard we built, you can really track the number of unemployed in the last week. And another important thing is that you can really see a lot of details, usually on a state level or even the Columbus metropolitan level. You are not really able to see a lot of the detailed demographics or which industries, occupations are having a lot of unemployed workers. So this dashboard can really inform you a lot about that. And another tool we have built is the workforce supply and projection tools. So it tracks the recent graduates from Ohio public colleges, and we link their major code with the occupation code, and it will inform you like what kind of worker with what kind of skills will be available in the job market. And also the Bureau of Labor Statistics and also the census data. These are all very useful tools for you to really look at the data and see what is going on in the current job market.
Thank you. And Marilyn?
Marilyn Brown, and my question is for all of you, and I particularly appreciate Ryan Burgess's comments about what Goodwill does with non-traditional employees. and that's really my question for all of you. Are you willing and able to hire non-traditional employees in your organizations? And do you think that's an untapped resource that we have that we just haven't really taken good advantage of, looking at those with criminal justice involvement or just not been in the workforce for other reasons, and have just other needs, disability needs, and other things that might be good quality employees, but they've just never been tapped to be in the workforce?
Oh, sure. So the short answer is yes, absolutely. We have a strong commitment to hiring from those kind of untapped pools. A quick plug, there's one report that was issued in the last year or so called Hidden Workers by Joe Fuller. He's out of the Harvard Business School. I think it's one of the best reports ever done on workforce, but really identifying there's like 27 million people in our country that fall into a lot of those groups. These are individuals, they want to work. They want to work. And it's up to us to provide that opportunity to them. So yeah, when it comes to second chance employment, commitment to that, individuals with disabilities, and you will find these are some of the most loyal employees you will ever hire. The individual, and Margie knows this, that heads up kind of our maintenance at our main headquarters. He spent some time in prison many decades ago, but he is one of the best employees we have. His commitment to Goodwill is outstanding, and so we just have to find ways to give those individuals a chance.
I'll speak on behalf of Huntington. I will tell you, because we're so involved in the communities and so many of our leaders are on not-for-profit boards across the organization, we end up tapping into groups that we would not have normally tapped into. So, for example, I've served on a board for adults, high school students who are on the autism spectrum and how they break into the workforce. And it was a workforce group in that space. And I know that at Huntington we employ several folks that have autism because they're exceptionally good at finding data and retaining that type of thing and staying focused in those areas. So we are always looking for folks that are on any kind of spectrum in terms of whether it be disability or something to that nature to be able to expand our workforce and make accommodations to make them feel comfortable and productive and welcome at Huntington.
Marilyn, the other thing I would say about this, and to the business leaders, business owners in the room too, don't think you need to do this just out of some corporate social responsibility reason. Do this because there's a business case, and there is.
It's the right thing to do.
Absolutely.
People want to work. Yeah, I agree.
Let's go to our next question.
All right, Shelley Casto is curious to hear how people who support themselves through the gig economy factor into the labor statistics and shifting participation in the workforce.
Yeah, that's a good question. How are they quantified?
So is the question specific to gig workers?
Yes.
Yes. So for the gig workers, currently, we usually think about YouTubers and Uber drivers and people who deliver food and packages to our door. So yes. So actually, those given the latest technology, these jobs are really recently created, and a lot of them don't really require a lot of don't really have a lot of barriers. You don't need a bachelor's degree to create YouTube videos or to become an Uber driver, right? So yes. So I do believe with the development in technology, it does really change the requirements for a lot of the jobs. And also, there are also a lot of online educations. So if you are, if you can get a certain level of training, and as long as you can demonstrate your ability to do the job, I do believe some companies are willing to hire you, even if you don't have the traditional college degree.
Hi, can you introduce yourself?
Certainly. I'm Bill Wayhoff of Steptoe and Johnson. And I was wondering if the panel is aware of, I'm not, but if they're aware of how many facilities there are in central Ohio. So we're going to have this big influx of manufacturing of various kinds in which employers can place their equipment and whatnot and have employees pre-trained off-site, because that's a great way to get people acclimated to the workforce. Any idea of how many facilities there are in central Ohio like that? Thank you.
I don't have a number, but I do know the table right here, Columbus State, the folks at Columbus State, I'm sure would be more than happy to work with you on trying to find a way to do that.
I'm not familiar with the number either.
I think the Intel, the influx of Intel jobs is going to change a lot of that as well, because they've been talking about not only investing in colleges and universities, but in workforce training directly, and even in a high school level, getting people ready. And your next question?
Yep. This question is from Marla Jones. What does everyone think of bringing back vocational training in high school, or structure something in college as well to address that group of folks that do not want to get a 4-year degree?
Yeah, I think Columbus State will say we're doing that, but we'll ask you, Dr. Liu, are we seeing more of that, more of a trend, not just from community colleges?
Well, I do believe there is increasing trend. So first, so in academia, recently there is increasing number of research about the effectiveness of this type of training programs. But I think recent years, the educators and also policymakers started to address this really the shorter term trainings, these more practical programs, because again, with the development of technology, we eventually, the machines and computers will be able to replace some of the workers who are doing routine jobs. So even if you have a college degree, but if your job is really routine, like office workers or bank tellers, so if your job is really routine, eventually it could be replaced by machines or computers. So what we really need are people who are doing non-routine jobs, who are doing really flexible jobs, and this includes a really large number of people who get training beyond high school, but less than college. So yes, I do believe there should be an increasing number of this type of trainings.
And I'll just comment on that as well. I think that, I think you mentioned, Ryan, that part of the responsibility is on the businesses to think differently about vocational programs. I think, back to Colleen's point, I think it's going to take parents to think differently, too, about vocational programs and ask for vocational programs in their high schools. I remember when my son went to school, he would tell me what he wanted to do, computer science, and I said, yep, and that means a university degree. And I had no open to listen to anything beyond a university degree. And now, in my position now, and working with the Workforce Development Board, there's so many other options that he could have pursued, but I wasn't open to those. So I think it'll take parents to think differently about their kids' career trajectories.
You know, my father was an electrician, and all they did was tell the four of us, you've got to go to college, you've got to go to college, you've got to go to college. And ironically, now people are saying, you should be an electrician. Right?
Well, and I think, one of our greatest strengths as a country is our diversity. So why do we think one mode of education is going to work for everybody? We have different passions, different interests, different goals. So let's
different
create
skill
different,
sets.
absolutely,
Yeah.
let's create
Yeah.
different pathways for the individuals.
We have one more question.
Hello, I'm Gina Hondel with Saturn Partners and Ascension Construction Solutions. And Ryan, I was really intrigued by your comment about removing the requirements related to education, but how do you normalize or level that person's experience to compare with what you've been doing in the past?
Yeah. No, great question. And as I mentioned, this is a fascinating conversation to have with talent teams and HR professionals and hiring managers. When you almost act like you're a 3-year-old in the conversation and you keep asking why? Why does that require a master's? Why does that require a bachelor's? And it forces you to boiling it down to skills and competencies. And that's a very different conversation, but that's ultimately, I think, what we want are people that have those skills and competencies to do whatever position we're hiring for. So it is a different conversation, taking into account somebody's experience, what skills they've demonstrated in the past. But then even more challenging is, and this is another thing a lot of companies are thinking about, is they've employed this new technology to scan resumes, the thousands of resumes that they get. And they're filtering people out because they're negatively looking for, oh, they don't have them, they're out, as opposed to taking a lens of, but this person could do something different by looking at the skills that they do bring. So it's an entirely different conversation, but one that I think we all need to have.
Although for the educators in the room, we also don't want to downplay what you learn, how you expand, how your thinking develops when you do get a college degree. So thank you to all of our panelists, and I think we have some final comments.
Wow, what a phenomenal day and a great session. I hope you found today's forum so inspiring that each of you will look to what you can do differently and what you can do better, and that we'll all work to connect with one another a little more deeply so that we can make the workforce here in Central Ohio more vibrant and inclusive and a joy to be with for the current generation and generations to come. I certainly learned that if you work and take your kid to work day, that even if you don't have kids, go find one and take them. So thank you so much to today's forum sponsors, Improving. They invest in people and help them reach their full potential. So thank you, Improving. And to our friends at Corner-Kokosing and Columbus State. I'll spare you the singing of the rest of that. And thank you also to our online virtual seat patrons and to the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation and the Columbus Dispatch for supporting today's live stream. And special appreciation to today's speaker. Let's give them a round of applause. David Cofer from Columbus State, Shannan from the Workforce Development Board, Ryan Burgess, Goodwill Columbus, Nichole Kneedler, Huntington National Bank, and Dr. Tian Liu, the Ohio State University, and of course our amazing host, Colleen Marshall, J.D., from WCMH NBC4, right? Don't kidnap anybody's kid, but it would be kind of weird to like drive by and go, hey, you're a kid, you need to come work with me. That'd be hilarious. And I definitely want to say, bring back home ec and shop, because God knows I can't align. I need YouTube. And YouTube can't be my only teacher. So please make plans to join us next Wednesday, because there's a Wednesday in every week, for the next installment in our Democracy in Crises series, Misinformation. Does the First Amendment need an update? And I swear, I almost made the mistake of saying the Second Amendment, but I don't want anything to happen to me. With our host, Mike Thompson. I'm going to get in trouble for that. Thank you for joining us. We certainly couldn't do this without you. And we look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. Thank you.